The cessation of hostilities, that global sigh of relief after years of mechanized slaughter, masked a more insidious phenomenon. Amidst the jubilant throngs and the dismantling of barbed wire, figures, dark figures, detached themselves from the wreckage, becoming phantoms in the nascent peace. The architects of calculated cruelty, the functionaries of industrialized demise simply vanished. Not all the jackals were caged. Some, the most cunning, the most ruthless, melted into the disarray. How did they accomplish this vanishing act? This escape from the very fabric of justice that the Allied powers were so painstakingly trying to weave? Who, driven by warped ideology or pragmatic self-interest, provided the threads for their clandestine tapestry? And what became of them in the decades that followed, these men whose hands were stained with the indelible ink of genocide? May of 1945, the guns, at long last, had fallen silent. Yet the silence itself was a deceptive shroud, concealing a festering wound. Nazi Germany, the monstrous regime that had plunged the world into chaos, lay in ruins, mirroring the bombed-out cities it had sought to dominate. Berlin, once the epicenter of its twisted ideology, was now a smouldering testament to its hubris. Hitler, the demagogue who had mesmerized a nation, had taken his own life in the claustrophobic confines of a bunker, a final act of cowardice. Himmler, the architect of the final solution, cheated the hangman's noose by swallowing a cyanide capsule, his secrets dying with him. Goebbels, the master propagandist, poisoned his own children, a grotesque parody of familial devotion. The Reich, built on lies and sustained by terror, had imploded with astonishing speed, leaving behind a vacuum filled with fear, recrimination, and the chilling realization of what had been lost and what could never be recovered. But the Schutzstaffel, the SS, those unwavering soldiers of Hitler's inner circle, the embodiment of his fanatical vision, did not evaporate with the regime. Rather, they dispersed, like poisoned seeds carried on the wind, each germinating plans for survival, for evasion, for a new existence free from the consequences of their actions. The SS was not a monolithic entity. It encompassed a vast spectrum of individuals, from high-ranking generals who orchestrated entire campaigns of extermination to low-level guards who stood watch over the gates of hell, from desk-bound bureaucrats who meticulously catalogued the names of the condemned to zealous ideologues who preached racial purity. Some had directly participated in the atrocities, leading killing squads, overseeing gassings, and carrying out unspeakable acts of violence. Others had been complicit through their silence, their obedience, their unwavering adherence to orders no matter how depraved. By the war's end, the vast majority of them were acutely aware of the enormity of their participation, the irreversible stain on their souls, and many understood, with chilling clarity, that their survival depended on their ability to disappear, to shed their identities, to become ghosts in the post-war world. The Allied forces, a juggernaut of retribution, were advancing from all directions. The Soviets had stormed Berlin, planting the red flag atop the Reichstag. The Americans were pushing relentlessly through the West, liberating concentration camps and uncovering the full horror of the Holocaust. The British were sweeping in from the north, rounding up suspected war criminals. Each passing day brought fresh arrests, new revelations, and an increasing sense of panic within the ranks of the SS. Yet, amidst the chaos, they had been preparing for this precise moment, anticipating the collapse of the Reich and the inevitable pursuit of its henchmen. Orders, disseminated through clandestine channels, instructed them to destroy evidence, to obliterate any trace of their involvement in the atrocities. Concentration camps were emptied with brutal efficiency through forced marches, euphemistically termed evacuations, a macabre dance of death across the ravaged landscape. Prisoners, already weakened by starvation and disease, were forced to walk for miles without food, water, or shelter, collapsing by the roadside, only to be shot if they could no longer keep pace. These were not simply evacuations, they were elaborate cover-ups, designed to eliminate witnesses, to erase the memory of the camps from the face of the earth. The primary objective, meticulously planned and ruthlessly executed, was the systematic elimination of any evidence that could link the SS to the crimes they had committed. The first step on the road to escape was the obliteration of identity, the shedding of the past like a snake shedding its skin. The most damning marker, the most perilous identifier, was the SS blood type tattoo, a small but lethal symbol usually inked beneath the left arm. This seemingly insignificant mark was a death warrant, a guarantee of immediate arrest and interrogation by Allied troops who had been specifically trained to look for it. Consequently, countless SS members frantically attempted to erase this telltale sign, employing desperate and often barbaric methods. Some seared the tattoo with burning cigarettes, inflicting excruciating pain in a futile attempt to obliterate the ink. Others, armed with knives or shards of glass, sliced and hacked at their flesh, leaving grotesque scars in their wake. Still others attempted to camouflage the tattoo by superimposing random designs over it, creating bizarre and often comical works of amateur body art. These efforts were not always successful, and many were apprehended despite their attempts at concealment, but for others, it represented their only chance, their sole lifeline in a sea of impending doom. Uniforms, the symbols of their allegiance and their crimes, were hastily buried in shallow graves or burned in clandestine bonfires, the acrid smoke, carrying with it the stench of guilt and desperation. Forged documents, meticulously crafted by skilled counterfeiters, were passed from hand to hand, each one a fabricated history, a fictional identity designed to withstand the scrutiny of Allied authorities. Old comrades, bound together by shared experiences and ideological convictions, became fictitious relatives, their relationships reimagined and their pasts meticulously rewritten. Real names, the foundation of identity, were discarded and replaced with aliases, chosen with care to avoid suspicion and to blend seamlessly into the chaotic tapestry of displaced persons. Camps, overflowing with genuine prisoners of war, also became sanctuaries for SS members masquerading as ordinary soldiers, hoping to evade detection amidst the sheer volume of detainees. The Americans and the British, overwhelmed by the scale of the task, were not always equipped to distinguish between genuine POWs and SS imposters, creating opportunities for escape and deception. In some instances, entire units of SS troops surrendered en masse, presenting themselves as regular soldiers and receiving the same treatment as ordinary prisoners of war, a testament to the confusion and disarray that characterized the immediate aftermath of the conflict. Higher-ranking SS officers, however, faced far greater challenges in their attempts to evade capture. Their faces were well known, their names synonymous with the atrocities of the regime. Escape was a far more perilous undertaking. Some, like Reinhard Heydrich, the architect of the final solution, were already dead, assassinated by Czech partisans in a daring act of defiance. Others, like Ernst Kaltenbrunner, the head of the Reich Security Main Office, attempted to flee but were apprehended by Allied forces, their plans thwarted by their notoriety. Many, facing the inevitable consequences of their actions, chose suicide as a final act of defiance or despair. By gun, by poison, or by grenade, they ended their own lives before anyone else could hold them accountable, silencing their secrets forever. But not all of them succumbed to capture or despair. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, managed to escape from Germany altogether, disappearing into the anonymity of the post-war world. The roads, choked with refugees fleeing the devastation, offered a measure of concealment. The railways, barely functioning, provided a means of transportation, albeit unreliable and dangerous. Identification procedures were lax, often non-existent, creating loopholes for those seeking to evade scrutiny. The prevailing chaos provided the SS with something they desperately needed: time to plan their escape, time to forge new identities, time to disappear. Some fled alone, relying on their own wits and resources to navigate the treacherous landscape. Others formed small, tightly knit units, bound together by shared loyalty and a common goal. They moved through forests, evading patrols and scavenging for food. They rode on the roofs of trains, clinging precariously to life as they traversed the bombed-out countryside. They walked for days through ruined towns, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Many sought refuge in Austria or Italy, hoping to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the advancing Soviet forces. These countries, with their porous borders and sympathetic populations, offered a potential escape route to freedom. Their ultimate objective was not simply to vanish from sight. It was to find a way out of Europe altogether, to start anew in a country far removed from the reach of Allied justice. But escaping across Germany was only the first step in a much more complex and perilous journey. The real getaway would require something more than luck and determination. It would require assistance from those who sympathised with their plight, or feared the alternative, a network of support that could provide safe passage and a new beginning. It would require a destination, a place where they could disappear without a trace, and it would require a convincing facade, a fabricated identity that could withstand the scrutiny of immigration officials and law enforcement agencies. The rat lines, a clandestine network of escape routes, would become their lifeline, Vatican passports their ticket to freedom, and the shores of South America their sanctuary. After the war, Europe was filled with ruins, refugees, and questions. Allied soldiers searched for Nazi leaders, war criminals, and especially members of the SS. But while some were arrested quickly, many slipped away. They didn't disappear by accident. They used something called the rat lines, underground escape routes that helped former SS officers avoid justice. These paths were carefully built, often by people who sympathised with them, or feared the rise of communism more than they feared Nazis. The rat lines weren't tunnels or secret trails through the forest. They were networks of people, places, and documents. One of the biggest hubs was in northern Italy. Cities like Bolzano, South Tyrol, and Genoa became stopping points for men hiding from war crimes trials. In these cities, fugitives met priests, diplomats, or Red Cross workers who were willing to help. Sometimes it was because they believed these men had changed. Other times it was pure politics. Rome was especially important. In the heart of the city, Bishop Alois Hudal, an Austrian Catholic with strong Nazi sympathies, opened church doors to former SS officers. He ran a home for German-speaking refugees. But it became more than that. It became a shelter for men like Franz Stangl, the commandant of Treblinka, and possibly even Isef Mangala. Hudal used his position in the Vatican's Refugee Commission to issue false identity papers. He said it was an act of mercy. Others saw it as betrayal. The International Red Cross also played a part, knowingly or not. Its offices in Italy issued thousands of travel documents to displaced persons, but many were based on fake names and lies. The paperwork wasn't always checked, and once someone had a Red Cross ID and a Catholic baptismal certificate, they could apply for visas to faraway countries. Places like Argentina, Syria, or Egypt welcomed these men, sometimes in secret, sometimes in the open. Argentina under President Juan Perón became one of the most active safe havens. Perón believed former Nazis could help build his country's military and industry. In return for silence and loyalty, fugitives were given homes, jobs, and new names. Klaus Barbie went to Bolivia. Walter Ruff escaped to Chile. Aloy Brunner ended up in Syria. None of them made it alone. They were carried by the rat lanes. The rat lines didn't just offer escape. They gave these men a second chance, a new identity, a new country, and a clean slate. These networks sent killers into new lives across oceans. They just changed names and kept on living. The new lives of the SS Europe in the immediate aftermath of the conflagration resembled a vast, smouldering ruin, a landscape scarred by conflict and teeming with displaced souls. Amidst this chaos, Allied forces embarked on a daunting task. to locate and apprehend Nazi leaders, war criminals, and, most urgently, members of the dreaded SS. While some were swiftly brought to justice, their crimes too blatant to ignore, countless others slipped through the cracks, vanishing into the anonymity of the post-war world. Their disappearance was not accidental, not a matter of mere chance. It was the result of a carefully orchestrated network of escape routes known as the rat lines, which provided a lifeline to former SS officers seeking to evade prosecution. These clandestine pathways were not simply physical routes, tunnels snaking beneath borders or secret trails winding through dense forests. They were intricate webs of human connections, a complex interplay of individuals, institutions, and documents, woven together by shared ideologies, pragmatic calculations, and, in some cases, a perverse sense of moral justification. The architects of these rat lines were a diverse group, united by their sympathy for the plight of former Nazis, or, more often, by their fear of the rising tide of communism. They viewed the Soviet Union as a greater threat than the remnants of the Nazi regime, and were willing to provide assistance to those they believed could serve as a bulwark against its expansion. This Cold War calculus, this prioritization of political expediency over moral principle, would have profound and far-reaching consequences for the pursuit of justice in the decades to come. One of the largest and most active hubs for these escape networks was located in northern Italy, a region characterized by its proximity to the Vatican, its porous borders, and its complex political landscape. Cities like Bolzano, nestled in the South Tyrol, and Genoa, a bustling port city, became key transit points for men seeking to escape the long arm of the law. In these clandestine havens, fugitives encountered a network of individuals willing to provide assistance, often at considerable personal risk. Priests, motivated by religious conviction or misguided compassion, offered sanctuary within the walls of monasteries and churches. Diplomats, exploiting their privileged positions, provided false documentation and facilitated travel arrangements. Red Cross workers, either complicit in the scheme or simply overwhelmed by the sheer volume of paperwork, issued travel documents without conducting thorough background checks. The motivations of these individuals were varied and complex. Some genuinely believed that the men they were assisting had changed, repented for their past actions, and deserved a second chance. Others were driven by political considerations, viewing these former Nazis as potential allies in the fight against communism. Still others were simply motivated by financial gain, exploiting the desperation of the fugitives for personal enrichment. Rome, the Eternal City, played a particularly crucial role in the ratline network. In the heart of the Vatican, Bishop Alois Hudal, an Austrian Catholic prelate with well-known Nazi sympathies, opened the doors of his church to former SS officers, providing them with shelter, sustenance, and most importantly, a means of escape. Hudal ran a home for German-speaking refugees, ostensibly providing assistance to those displaced by the war, but in reality, it became a safe haven for some of the most notorious war criminals of the era. Men like Franz Stangl, the commandant of the Treblinka extermination camp, and possibly even Josef Mengele, the infamous Angel of Death of Auschwitz, found refuge within Hudal's sanctuary, their presence a chilling testament to the bishop's warped sense of morality. Hudal, exploiting his position within the Vatican's Refugee Commission, issued false identity papers to these fugitives, providing them with the documentation they needed to travel to safe havens in South America and the Middle East. He justified his actions as an act of mercy, a Christian duty to help those in need, but to many it was an act of betrayal, a profound affront to the memory of the millions who had perished at the hands of the Nazi regime. The International Red Cross, an organization dedicated to humanitarian assistance, also played a role in the ratline network, albeit unwittingly in many cases. Its offices in Italy issued thousands of travel documents to displaced persons, providing them with the means to travel to new lives in distant lands. However, Many of these documents were based on false names and fabricated stories, the paperwork often lacking the necessary scrutiny to detect the deception. Once an individual possessed a Red Cross identification card and a Catholic baptismal certificate, they could apply for visas to countries far removed from the reach of European justice. Places like Argentina, Syria, and Egypt welcomed these men, sometimes secretly, sometimes openly, providing them with a new beginning far from the ruins of their past. Argentina, under the leadership of President Juan Perón, emerged as one of the most active and welcoming safe havens for former Nazis. Perón, a populist leader with authoritarian tendencies, believed that these men could contribute to the modernization of his country's military and industry, bringing with them valuable skills and expertise. In return for their silence and loyalty, these fugitives were given homes, jobs, and new identities, allowing them to rebuild their lives in relative comfort and security. Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Leon, found refuge in Bolivia. Walter Rauff, the inventor of the mobile gas van, escaped to Chile. Alois Brunner, Adolf Eichmann's right-hand man, ended up in Syria. Each of them carried by the rat lines, each of them finding sanctuary in a country willing to overlook their past. The rat lines offered more than just escape. They offered a second chance, a new identity, a new country, and a clean slate. These clandestine networks sent killers across oceans, allowing them to reinvent themselves, to shed their past like a discarded garment, and to live out their lives in peace and prosperity. They simply changed their names and kept on living, their consciences untroubled by the ghosts of their victims. The new lives of the SS, built on lies and sustained by the complicity of others, were a testament to the enduring power of evil and the fragility of justice. Josef Mengele, the man who earned the chilling epithet Angel of Death within the barbed wire confines of Auschwitz-Birkenau, managed to elude capture and spent the remainder of his days basking in the tropical sun, surrounded by the verdant landscape of South America. He traded the sterile laboratories and gas chambers for palm trees and ocean breezes, escaping the prison bars that should have been his eternal companions. After a period of clandestine existence in Bavaria, lasting approximately 3 years, he skillfully navigated the labyrinthine cracks of post-war Europe, employing the same tactics and resources that had aided countless other fugitives: forged documents, the protective embrace of the Church, and the unwavering sympathy of those who still clung to the remnants of Nazi ideology. In 1949, he boarded a ship in Genoa, setting sail for Argentina with a Red Cross passport bearing the name Helmut Gregor. The documentation was meticulously crafted, utterly convincing, and bolstered by falsified baptismal papers, ensuring its authenticity under even the most stringent scrutiny. His vessel eventually docked in Buenos Aires, a city already teeming with former Nazis seeking refuge and a fresh start, their past carefully concealed beneath layers of fabricated identities and unspoken agreements. Mengele, once a promising scholar born in 1911 in the quaint Bavarian town of Günzburg, had transformed into a symbol of unparalleled cruelty, his name forever associated with the horrors of the Holocaust. The son of a prosperous manufacturer, he had pursued his academic aspirations with vigour, studying medicine and anthropology at prestigious universities in Munich, Vienna, and Frankfurt, absorbing the prevailing scientific theories of the era, including the insidious doctrines of racial hygiene and eugenics. He joined the SS in 1938, embracing the Nazi ideology with fervent conviction, becoming a true believer in the superiority of the Aryan race and the necessity of eliminating those deemed inferior. At Auschwitz, his name became synonymous with terror and death, whispered in hushed tones by terrified prisoners who knew that a single glance from his cold, calculating eyes could determine their fate. Prisoners dubbed him the Angel of Death, a grim moniker that reflected his role in selecting who would live and who would die, who would be subjected to his twisted experiments, and who would be sent to the gas chambers. He displayed a particular fascination with twins, children, and individuals with physical deformities, viewing them as subjects for his pseudo-scientific research, their bodies mere tools in his quest to unlock the secrets of human genetics. Survivors recounted chilling tales of Mengele's selections, describing his detached demeanour, his almost casual cruelty as he pointed left or right, condemning some to immediate death and consigning others to a living hell of experimentation. They remembered him smiling during these selections, exhibiting no remorse, no empathy, no flicker of human emotion as he decided who would live and who would die, his actions seemingly devoid of any moral compass. In Argentina, Mengele embarked on a new chapter of his life, establishing himself in Buenos Aires under the alias Helmut Gregor, finding solace and support within the city's thriving expatriate circles. Argentina, under the rule of Juan Perón, had opened its doors to Nazis and collaborators, welcoming them with open arms and providing them with a safe haven from prosecution. Mengele, shielded by this protective environment, found himself surrounded by like-minded individuals, men who shared his past and his ideology, men who were willing to protect him from the consequences of his actions. He even brazenly applied for Argentinian citizenship in 1956, confident that his past would remain buried and that his new identity would withstand any scrutiny. However, the tide began to turn after 1960, when Israeli agents captured Adolf Eichmann, another architect of the Holocaust, in Buenos Aires, sending shockwaves through the city's Nazi networks and shattering the illusion of impunity. Mengele, realizing that his own safety was now compromised, went into hiding once again, abandoning his comfortable existence and fleeing to Paraguay, where he obtained citizenship with the assistance of sympathetic officials, men who were willing to turn a blind eye to his past in exchange for political favors or financial rewards. He then moved to Brazil in 1961, seeking to further distance himself from the reach of justice, finding refuge in the vastness of the South American continent. In Brazil, Mengele was taken in by the Stemmer family, German immigrants who sheltered him and provided him with a sense of security. They concealed his true identity, keeping his location secret and protecting him from the outside world, becoming his willing accomplices in his continued evasion of justice. He worked on farms, adopting a life of relative simplicity and isolation, avoiding doctors, refusing to appear in public, and living in constant fear of exposure. He sometimes posed as a veterinarian, drawing upon his medical knowledge to treat animals and further conceal his true identity. He adopted a series of false names: Dr. José Mengele, Peter Hochbichler, S.J. Pfizer, moving from house to house, never staying in one place for too long, constantly looking over his shoulder, haunted by the ghosts of his past. He lived in fear, but he remained free, unburdened by the weight of accountability, untouched by the hand of justice. His son, Rolf Mengele, visited him in 1977, providing a rare glimpse into the mind of the man who had become synonymous with evil. Rolf later reported that his father showed no remorse, no regret for his actions at Auschwitz, continuing to believe that his work was justified, that his experiments were necessary for the advancement of science, that his role in the Holocaust was simply a matter of following orders. In 1979, Mengele suffered a stroke while swimming off the coast of Bertioga, Brazil, his body succumbing to the ravages of time and the weight of his hidden past. He drowned, his life ending not in a courtroom or a prison cell, but in the tranquil waters of the Atlantic Ocean, his body washed ashore and buried under a false name, his secret seemingly safe for eternity. He died as he had lived after the war, hidden, protected, and untouched by justice, a testament to the enduring ability of evil to evade accountability. His remains were not positively identified until 1985, when DNA tests confirmed the truth that many had long suspected, that the bones buried under the name Wolfgang Gerhard were indeed those of Josef Mengele, the angel of death of Auschwitz. But by then, the man who had become a symbol of human depravity had been gone for 6 years, his crimes unpunished, his victims unavenged. Franz Stangl, unlike many of his SS counterparts who sought refuge in the shadows, did not retreat into the jungles or adopt a dozen aliases. He lived in plain sight using his real name, holding down a steady job and interacting with neighbours who either remained blissfully ignorant of his past or chose to turn a blind eye. His life after the Holocaust was not defined by fear and paranoia, but by routine and normalcy, a stark contrast to the unimaginable horrors he had orchestrated. But before he arrived in Brazil, before he settled into a life of quiet comfort, he was one of the highest-ranking SS officers to successfully evade justice, a man responsible for the deaths of nearly 1 million human beings. His journey from obscurity to infamy, and then back to seeming anonymity, is a chilling illustration of the ease with which evil can flourish in the absence of accountability. Born in 1908 in Altmünster, Austria, Stangl grew up in a modest Catholic household, his early life unremarkable. He joined the Austrian gendarmerie, the rural police force, and after the Anschluss in 1938, when Austria was annexed by Nazi Germany, he was absorbed into the Nazi-controlled police force, his career taking an unexpected and sinister turn. His rise through the ranks was rapid, fueled by his efficiency, his obedience, and his willingness to embrace the Nazi ideology. He was recruited into the T4 euthanasia program, a precursor to the Holocaust, where he helped organize the systematic killing of people with disabilities in institutions like Hartheim and Bernburg, honing his skills in the mechanics of mass murder. From there, he was transferred to Operation Reinhard, the Nazi plan to exterminate the Jews of occupied Poland, a project of unprecedented scale and barbarity. Stangl was appointed commandant of Sobibor and later of Treblinka, two of the most notorious extermination camps, where he oversaw the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Between 1942 and 1943, nearly 900,000 Jews were murdered at Treblinka, their lives extinguished in the gas chambers, their bodies burned in open-air crematoria, their existence erased from the face of the earth. Stangl, as commandant, was responsible for every aspect of the camp's operation, from the reception of new arrivals to the disposal of the dead, ensuring that the killing machine ran with ruthless efficiency. Survivors described him as a cold and detached figure, often seen walking through the camp in his immaculate white riding boots, inspecting the operations with a critical eye, seemingly unmoved by the suffering and death that surrounded him. He later claimed that he was simply maintaining order and efficiency, that he never personally harmed a prisoner, that he was merely a cog in the machine, not responsible for its overall purpose. But his job was extermination, and he performed it with unwavering dedication, ensuring that Treblinka became one of the deadliest killing centres of the Holocaust. By late 1943, with Treblinka shut down and the tide of the war turning against Germany, Stangl faded into the collapsing Reich, attempting to disappear amidst the chaos and confusion. He was arrested by US forces in 1945 and held in an Austrian prison, facing the prospect of justice for his crimes. But in 1948, he escaped with the assistance of Nazi escape networks and Catholic contacts, utilising the same rat lines that had aided so many other war criminals in their flight from justice. He made his way to Rome, where Bishop Alois Hudal, the same prelate who had provided assistance to Josef Mengele and countless others, furnished Stangl with false documents, allowing him to travel to safety. He initially travelled to Syria, seeking temporary refuge in the Middle East, before finally arriving in Brazil in 1951, armed with a visa supported by Catholic relief organisations, their unwitting complicity facilitating his escape from justice. In São Paulo, he settled quietly, assuming a life of relative anonymity. He found employment as a technical inspector at Volkswagen do Brasil, a position that provided him with a steady income and a sense of normalcy. He used his real name, even listing it on employment records, making no attempt to conceal his identity. He joined local German clubs and social groups, immersing himself in the expatriate community, seemingly confident that his past would remain buried and that he could live out his life undisturbed. His past was known among certain circles, whispered about in hushed tones, But nobody turned him in. Nobody alerted the authorities. Nobody sought to bring him to justice. For over a decade, he lived undisturbed, enjoying the comforts of a middle-class existence, seemingly immune from the consequences of his actions. That changed in 1967, when Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal, the tireless pursuer of war criminals, tracked him down, his relentless investigation uncovering Stangel's whereabouts and shattering his carefully constructed facade of normalcy. The West German government requested his extradition, seeking to bring him to trial for his role in the Holocaust. Stangl was arrested and sent back to Germany, where his trial began in 1970, a quarter of a century after the end of the war. The court convicted him for his role in the murder of nearly 1 million Jews at Sobibor and Treblinka, finding him guilty of crimes against humanity and sentencing him to life in prison, a belated but significant victory for justice. In 1971, just hours after giving a lengthy interview to journalist Gitta Serini, in which he finally admitted moral responsibility for what he had done, acknowledging the enormity of his crimes and expressing a degree of remorse, he died of heart failure. His voice, long silent, barely heard before it was extinguished forever. His belated admission of guilt, coming so late in his life and so close to his death, raised questions about its sincerity and its impact on the victims and their families. It was a small consolation, a fleeting moment of acknowledgement, but it could never fully atone for the unspeakable atrocities he had committed. The stories of Mengele and Stangl, Barbie, Pribka, and the countless others who slipped through the cracks of post-war justice serve as stark reminders of the failures of accountability, the enduring power of evil, and the enduring legacy of the Holocaust. The world declared, never again, a solemn vow to prevent such atrocities from ever happening again. But then, all too often, it quietly looked away, allowing the perpetrators to escape justice and live out their lives in peace. While a few SS men faced justice, their crimes exposed, and their punishment meted out, the vast majority slipped through the cracks, finding refuge in the apathy, the politics, and the power structures of the post-war world. Churches provided them with shelter, offering sanctuary within their walls and facilitating their escape. Democracies issued them passports, granting them the means to travel to safe havens and assume new identities. Dictators provided them with jobs, utilizing their skills and expertise to strengthen their regimes and suppress dissent. The post-war order, driven by the exigencies of the Cold War, often prioritized the pursuit of political allies over the pursuit of moral reckoning, choosing to align with former Nazis in the fight against communism, a decision that had profound and lasting consequences for the pursuit of justice and the healing of the wounds of the Holocaust. These men were not simply forgotten. They were protected, shielded from scrutiny, and allowed to rebuild their lives without facing the consequences of their actions. Their crimes faded from public memory, overshadowed by new conflicts and new concerns, but their afterlives infected the systems that welcomed them, leaving a stain on the conscience of the world. The failure was not just legal, a matter of inadequate laws or insufficient resources. It was human, a failure of empathy, a failure of moral courage, a failure to prioritize justice over expediency. History did not hide them. We did, choosing to look away, to forgive and forget, to prioritize our own comfort over the pursuit of truth. And in doing so, we proved that some ghosts don't haunt us. We live with them comfortably, accepting their presence as an uncomfortable but unavoidable reality, allowing their past to remain buried and their crimes to go unpunished. The echoes of impunity reverberate through the decades, reminding us of the fragility of justice and the enduring power of evil. The stories of the SS men who escaped justice are not just historical narratives, they are cautionary tales, reminding us